He had waited 100 years for this child, not 10 years, not 20. 100 years of a promise that kept not happening. 100 years of watching his wife grow old. 100 years of sleeping in tents across deserts and mountains, carrying a word from God that seemed to make less and less sense with every passing decade. The promise was simple. You will have a son, and through that son, your descendants will become a great nation, as countless as the stars in the sky, as countless as the grains of sand on the shore. Abraham had believed it. He had left his home, his country, everything he knew, because of it. He had walked away from the city of Ur, one of the greatest cities in the ancient world, because God told him to go, and he went. And then he waited. For years, nothing happened. His wife Sarah was barren. They tried everything a human being could try. Sarah even gave Abraham her servant Hagar, and a son named Ishmael was born. But God told Abraham, "That is not the son I meant." The son of the promise had to come through Sarah, and Sarah was 90 years old. When God appeared to Abraham and said, "This time next year, Sarah will have a son," Sarah was listening from inside the tent. She laughed. Not out of joy, out of disbelief. She was 90. Her husband was 99. The idea was absurd, but the child came, Isaac. The name means laughter, named after the laugh that turned into tears of joy when the impossible actually happened. And then God told Abraham to kill him. It was not a dream. It was not a vision. It was the same voice that had spoken to Abraham his entire life. The voice that had told him to leave Ur. The voice that had made the promise. The voice he had learned to trust over 75 years of following it across the ancient world. And this is what the voice said. "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love. Go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Your only son, whom you love." God did not pretend this was easy. He did not say this child or the boy. He said, "Your only son, whom you love." The Bible gives us no record of Abraham's reaction in that moment. No argument, no bargaining, no weeping through the night. No, but God, you promised. No negotiation like the one Abraham had done when he bargained for Sodom. Just silence. And then morning. What it tells us is this. He got up early the next morning. Early. Before the camp was awake. Before anyone could talk him out of it. As if he wanted to move before his own mind could stop him. He saddled the donkey himself. He did not wake a servant to do it. He did not delegate this task. His hands worked in the dark, tightening the straps, preparing for a journey he never wanted to take. He cut the wood himself, wood for the altar, wood for the fire, wood that would be used to burn the body of his son. He woke 2 servants. He woke Isaac, and they set out toward the south, toward a region called Moriah that God had not yet fully identified. Just a direction, just a promise that he would know the mountain when he saw it. 3 days they traveled. 3 days of desert sun and cold nights. 3 days of the boy walking beside his father, talking, asking questions, pointing at things along the road the way children do. 3 days of Abraham answering him and laughing at the right moments and watching his son's face in the firelight at night. What did Abraham think about during those 3 days? We are not told, but we are told something else. In the New Testament, centuries later, the writer of Hebrews explains what was happening in Abraham's mind during that walk. He says, Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. His logic was this. God made a promise. The promise runs through Isaac. Isaac cannot be permanently dead because the promise has not been fulfilled yet. Therefore, if I kill him, God will raise him from the dead, because God does not break his word. Abraham believed in resurrection before resurrection had ever happened. He had seen enough of God to know that death was not the final answer to anything God had promised. On the third day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw it. The mountain. He stopped. He turned to the two servants who had traveled with them. "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go up there to worship, and then we will come back to you. We will come back. Both of us." He said it to the servants. And then he began to climb. Isaac carried the wood. Abraham took the fire and the knife. And his son, his miracle son, his 100-year-old promise walking beside him, carried the wood for his own sacrifice up the side of the mountain. Halfway up, Isaac stopped. "Father?" "Yes, my son, the fire and the wood are here. But where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" The question landed like a stone. Abraham did not hesitate. He answered without stopping, without looking away, without breaking. "God himself will provide the lamb, my son." And they walked on together. We do not know how old Isaac was at this point. The Hebrew word the text uses is not the word for a young child. It suggests a young man, possibly a teenager, possibly older. Old enough to carry heavy wood up a mountain. Old enough that, if he had wanted to, he could have overpowered his elderly father and walked away. He did not. Whatever Abraham had told him during those 3 days of walking, whatever he had passed on about God, about the promise, about what it meant to trust a voice that makes no sense, Isaac had received it. He walked up that mountain knowing something was wrong and trusting that it would be made right. At the top, Abraham built the altar, stone by stone. He had built altars before. This is what he did when God appeared to him. He built altars to mark the places where heaven touched earth. But he had never built one like this. He arranged the wood on the altar. He bound Isaac's hands and feet. He lifted his son, this son he had waited 100 years for, this son whose name meant laughter, this son whose face looked like a miracle. And he laid him on top of the wood. He picked up the knife. He raised it. "Abraham! Abraham!" The voice came from the sky like a shout. He stopped. His hand was already in the air. His arm was already moving toward the moment he could never take back. "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham stood there with the knife in his hand, his son alive beneath him, his heart hammering in a way it had not hammered since he was a young man. He looked up, caught in a thicket a few steps away. Its horns tangled in the thorns, thrashing and unable to pull free, was a ram. Not a lamb, a ram, a full-grown male, standing right there, as if it had always been there, as if it had arrived exactly when it was needed, which it had. Abraham cut his son free. He took the ram. He built the fire. He completed the offering, not with the life God had given him, but with the provision God had made. And then he named the place, Yahweh Yireh, the Lord will provide. They came down the mountain together, father and son, both alive, both changed forever. And God spoke to Abraham one more time. "Because you have done this, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. And through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed." All nations on earth, not just Israel, not just the Middle East, all nations. That promise has been claimed by more than half the world's population. Christianity, Islam, and Judaism all trace their spiritual ancestry back to this man, standing on this mountain with a knife in his hand and a ram in a thicket. But there is something else about that mountain. Abraham called it Yahweh Yireh, the Lord will provide. And then he added a phrase that has puzzled people for thousands of years. On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Future tense. Not it was provided. Not it has been provided. It will be provided. As if what happened that day on Moriah was not the final version of the story. As if the ram in the thicket was a placeholder, a picture of something else, something that had not happened yet. That mountain became the most important piece of real estate in the ancient world. Centuries later, on that exact mountain, Mount Moriah, King Solomon built the temple. The place where heaven and earth were supposed to meet. The place where sacrifices were made, year after year, for 1,000 years. And then, centuries after that, in the city that had grown up around that mountain, Jerusalem, another son climbed another hill. His name was Jesus, and he carried wood on his back, and his hands were stretched out on that wood, and his father watched from heaven. And this time, there was no ram in the thicket. This time, the sacrifice was completed. Abraham had called it from 3,000 years away. On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Not a ram, not an animal, but a life that could actually pay the debt that all the rams and all the lambs had only ever been pointing toward. That is what was happening on that mountain in Moriah. Not just a test, not just a story, a promise, written in sand and stone and a father's trembling hands. That one day, God himself would provide what we could never provide for ourselves. And he did.